right, family, episode number 21, Experience of Grace. Do you know that the work of the new covenant believer is to believe and behold? You do not please God with your righteous behavior and your holy behavior. These things are side effects and they're fruit of right believing and beholding. The right believing in the finished works of Jesus Christ and the revelation of his grace, the revelation of the finished works. This is how you must first start from there in order to see holiness and righteousness in your behavior, which is really, we're talking about inward transformation. We're not talking about behavior modification. We're talking about inward transformation. And you can only get these things by having right believing and right understanding. You have to have these things or you will not see the fruit of your salvation. It was John the Baptist that said, "Behold, the Lamb of God which taketh away the sin in the world." It was Moses in the wilderness lifted up the bronze serpent on a pole and said, "Only behold the serpent on the pole," which is a picture of Jesus Christ. And he said, "And you'll be healed." He said, you can't receive healing by looking at you can't look at your sins and you can't look at your diseases. You got to behold the finished works of Jesus Christ, and then these things just flow through you. These things are side effects. This is not how you please God. These things are side effects. They're side effects. 1 Peter 1:13 says, "Wherefore gird up the loins of your mind, be sober, and hope to the end for the grace that is to be brought unto you at the revelation of Jesus Christ." So you see the power of God's grace, the power of God's favor flowing in your life. When you have more revelation, it's about revelation. It's about beholding. It sounds simple, sounds too easy, but that is how God designed it. And these are spiritual things. So my operative verse is going to be Matthew 5, verse 8. And this is a pretty easy verse. Most of us have heard it, seen it plenty of times. "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." But in my studies, I looked up this verse and looked at it in the Amplified Classic Version. And the first two things you got to understand about this bless and about being blessed and the pure in heart. First of all, bless is a strong word. It's a mouthful. I'm about to show you that now. But the pure in heart, over in Hebrews 10, it says that because of the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, anybody that believes in Jesus Christ, that he was our sacrificial sin substitute, you are forever purified. You are forever perfected. So when it talks about for those that are pure in heart, this is talking about you as a believer. So I'm going to read this, Matthew 5:8 in the Amplified Classic Edition. "Blessed, happy, enviably fortunate, and spiritually prosperous, possessing the happiness produced by the experience of God's favor, and especially conditioned by the revelation of his grace, regardless of their outward conditions, are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." Read this again. The word bless is not, it's action-packed. It's a mouthful. Happy, enviably fortunate, and spiritually prosperous, possessing the happiness produced by the experience of God's favor, and especially conditioned by the revelation of his grace, regardless of their outward conditions, are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. So this experience of grace, if you want to see the power of God's grace, the biblical definition of grace is unearned, unmerited, undeserved favor. So if you want to see this unearned, unmerited, undeserved favor, you need revelation, not good behavior. You need revelation. It's not your holiness. You need revelation. So I want to walk through something. I think I talked about this in the previous episodes, but I never really expounded on it. So I'm going to read a couple of verses here for each event. And just point out one thing and not go deep into it, because in each one of these, and once again, I like to give you a little bit to provoke you to go back and read and study these things for yourself, okay? Peter, James, and John, Peter, James, and John, Peter, James, and John. The name Peter, the Bible tells us plainly, Cephas. Cephas means a stone. Stone represents the law. The name James, Yokof in Hebrew, means to supplant or replace. The name John in Hebrew, Yohanan. When you see these three names together, this is a hidden message. It's not that Peter, James, and John did have a special place with Jesus Christ. Out of the 12, these were the three that were closest to him. But when Jesus singles these three out, this is like a hidden message. So you put the names together, Peter, James, and John, the law has been replaced by God's grace. So when you go and analyze the events when he singles these guys out, there's an explosive revelation here. And I just want to walk through each one because the three are the Mount Transfiguration, when he raised a little girl from the dead, Talitha Kumi, in the Garden of Gethsemane. So I just want to look at these verses. You're going to look at these verses completely different. So this portion of verses here, for each event, go back and reread for yourself. There's other things hidden here. I'm just really going to point out like one or two things, but there's other things hidden here. Go back and reread this. So when you see Peter, James, and John, and Peter, James, and John's mean the law has been replaced by God's grace. I'm about to show you the revelation of God's grace. You're about to be blessed. You're about to see this happiness. These things happen by simply the unveiling of Jesus Christ in the scriptures, the unveiling of his grace in the scriptures. This stuff does something to you. Matthew 17, verses 1 through 5. And after 6 days, Jesus taketh Peter, James, and John, his brother, and bringeth them up into a high mountain apart. Once again, the law has been replaced by God's grace. Verse 2 instantly says, and was transfigured before them. Transfigured and transformation is the same word. So he was transfigured, transformed before them. And his face did shine as the sun, and his raiment was white as the light. And behold, there appeared unto them Moses and Elias talking with him. Then answered Peter and said unto Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If thou wilt, let us make here 3 tabernacles, one for the three, and one for Moses, one for thee, and one for Moses, and one for Elias. While he yet spoke, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and behold, a voice out of the cloud which said, This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Hear him. Moses, the lawgiver. Elias, the law restorer. They represent the totality of the law. So God the Father comes and checks Peter and says, don't build it for 3 because the 3 are not equal. Moses and Elias are not equal to Jesus. Don't listen to them. Hear him. Hear the sound of grace. See the revelation of his grace. Don't hear them. Hear him. Hear grace. Talitha Kumi. Mark 5:35 through 42. While he yet spake, there came from the ruler of the synagogue's house certain which said, Thy daughter is dead, why troublest thou the master any further? As soon as Jesus heard the word that was spoken, he saith unto the ruler of the synagogue, Be not afraid, only believe. That's something, that right there, only believe. Jesus says this, all this is repetitive in the scriptures. Only believe, only believe, only believe. You sit in church all your life and they say, only believe, only believe, only believe. Especially in the faith circles, only believe, only believe. But then we never get like that precise, direct understanding and clarity of believing. And you could easily say, well, believe in Jesus. Is that with precision? Is that with precision? Be not afraid, only believe. Verse 37. And he suffered no man to follow him, save Peter and James and John, the brother of James. The very next verse, he says, only believe. And then Peter, James, and John. The law has been replaced by God's grace. So you go back and you revisit anytime Jesus says, only believe, and you get into this mindset of believing the revelation of his grace. Believing the law has been replaced by God's grace. Believe that God is no longer judging you and measure you according to your performance, according to your works, your good deeds or your bad deeds. He's judging you based on your ability to rest and trust and believe in the finished works of Jesus Christ. That's how you please God. That's how you see the power of God flowing in your body and in your life. And he cometh unto the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and seeth the tumult, and them that wept and wailed greatly. And when he was come in, he saith unto them, Why make ye this ado and weep? The damsel is not dead, but sleepeth. And they laughed him to scorn. But when he had put them all out, he taketh the father and the mother of the damsel, and them that were with him, and entered in where the damsel was lying. And he took the damsel by the hand, and said unto her, Talitha cumi, which is being interpreted, Damsel, I say unto thee, arise. And straightway the damsel arose and walked, for she was of the age of 12 years, and they were astonished with a great astonishment. And this law has been replaced by God's grace, and connected to this resurrection of the little girl. There's something about this revelation of grace. There's something about this grace where it has this component of resurrection power. I know we got a place in time in church where we just come to church, and our Christianity gets to a point where we're going through the motions. But when you start looking at some of the things, the hidden things, especially these little hidden things in the scriptures, there's something about this resurrection power. Paul the apostle of grace, had resurrection power flowing to him so strong, he was stoned to death and got up from a stoning. You can't get stoned to death and get up and start walking. It's not possible. You can't get stoned to death and then just shake it off. You can't do that. That's resurrection power flowing in that man so strong that he couldn't die. Acts chapter 20, Eutychus falls out the window and breaks his neck. Paul doesn't pray, doesn't do anything. He just goes and lays on him because of the resurrection power, because of the revelation of grace is flowing in him so strong. The boy got up after he broke his neck on the spot with no praying. I know the fervent effectual prayer, no praying. He just hugged the boy. It's going to go on. I was going to read all three. There's a lot more there. There's stuff there with the 12 years. I'm getting provoked to go digging into more of that, but I'm not even going to do that. That's for another time. Garden of Gethsemane. I'm reading from the NLT version. They went to the olive grove called Gethsemane, and Jesus said, Sit here while I go and pray. He took Peter, James, and John with him. And he became deeply troubled and distressed. He told them, My soul is crushed with grief. Emphasis, I'm troubled and I'm distressed. His soul was crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. He went a little farther and fell to the ground. He prayed that if it were possible, the awful hour awaiting him might pass him by. Abba, Father, he cried out, everything is possible for you. Please take this cup of suffering away from me, yet I want your will to be done, not mine. Then he returned and found the disciples asleep. He said unto Peter, Simon, are you asleep? Couldn't you watch with me even 1 hour? Keep watch and pray so that you will not give in to temptation. For the spirit is willing, but the body is weak. And the King James says the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. So we got the spirit in the flesh. Remember, we talked about in the flesh in a previous episode. I'm not going to do that, though. I want to go back to verse 33. He took Peter, James, and John, and he became deeply troubled and distressed. What is this telling us? When the law is replaced by God's grace, God will bear your troubles. God will bear your distress, your distress, your depression. My soul is crushed with grief. God will bear your grief when you rest in his grace, when you rest in the revelation of his grace, rest in the revelation of the finished works of Jesus Christ. He went a little farther and fell to the ground. When you fall, Jesus will pick you up. The revelation of his grace will pick you up. He fell for you so you don't have to fall, so you don't have to stay down. There's other things here too with this one here, and I'm not going to do that. But I just wanted to point out these three events here connected to Peter, James, and John. The law has been replaced by God's grace, like we saw in Matthew 5:8. The revelation of his grace, the revelation of the finished works of Jesus Christ. This is how you receive the power of God in your body, in your life, and in your mind. These things will transform you from the inside out. We're not talking about behavior modification. We're talking about inward transformation. You get a hold of some revelation, and this stuff does something to you. It does something to your body. It don't have to make sense to your human mind. These are spiritual things. This is spiritual food. So experience grace. Zechariah 4:7, grace.